Okay, here we go. Second half. So now let's go. I'm going to show you how to obtain a nice homogeneous wash. So as you can see, I use this brush all the time. This is the $150 brush. It's really good, and even if it's expensive, you will use it a lot. I also keep all these old brushes that even if they don't have the point anymore, this is still Kolinsky Saville. They still work great for, in this case, laying down a wash, right? So now, what are we gonna do? You've seen how before with the putting paint over a wet layer of paint, the paint spreads out like that. The same concept. So what we can do in here is, instead of paint, I'm going to put a layer of water here. Like, make sure that this layer of water is going to be very homogeneous, not too much, right? Not too much water. And you want to make sure that you do it quickly, right? Because this paper will tend to absorb the water very fast, very quickly, and especially when you have a hot light above here like this. But then you look from slightly different angles to see if the sheen of the water is kind of even. At this point, that you'll have prepared your wash already, right? Which I haven't. Your wash already. What you can do, so you can prepare as much paint as you need. Test it, right? Test it, and then let's assume that works. Now we're going to put the layer here, right? And this layer will kind of, this paint will spread evenly. Now you see how I try not to go over the same area too many times, just enough to homogenize the paint. But you see how it spreads there, see that? Not here, because that is it's the margin between the wet and the dry. So the paint will stay where you put it, right? And your even, then your wash is going to be even, right? So now the thing is that you have to leave it alone now for a while. And maybe if you have areas where there's a little bit more paint than it should be, you could go there, dry up the brush, right? Make it dry, and then go there, touch it here, and see that how kind of soaks up the paint, right? So I don't want to do it too much because I need that to be even. But you could then go back and kind of lift the paint a little bit more. Now, that's how you do a wash. You could use a bigger brush, a smaller brush, and that is kind of a reflection because of the light, because the paper will buckle. So now at this point in here, I could decide to have maybe let's see a brownish layer, right? Darker color. And I'm going to put it here, right? I could go over here, kind of violet red, like the one I have in here. See that kind of dark. And then I put it here, let it run a little bit, right? And try to replicate the same. Actually, I'm going to make it up, right? Because we want to show you how we can really play with this, right? Up here, maybe it kind of spreads, but more lightly, right? And I could come up with this kind of mottling that you see here and there, right? And you see how, I mean, you can follow the colors that you see in the leaf. I just don't want to be too precise now, because we're going with this time to do that later on, okay? So let's see now what happens if in here maybe I put a little bit of yellow color here, right? And that, see, the kind of spreads gently, right? And it so when you do this, avoid to do the sponge painting thing, because that leaves patterns, right? So try to break it up in a chaotic pattern, because that's more like what happens in nature. If you find a pattern that is too repetitive, create maybe by the mark left by the specific arrangement of the brush, it will look mechanical, it will look weird, it's not good, right? So now in here we have, let's say, maybe I want to darken that a little bit more. And actually, you know what, before I do that, I'm going to let it dry a little bit. Before I do that, I can come up with this nice stem, right? And even if it's not as sharp, as bright, I want to make it really, really sharp here. And it's actually, I don't have a stem in here, right? So I'm going to make up stuff here, right? But I've seen that red stem earlier on, and I want to see a nice, beautiful stem in here. Maybe some paint will bleed from it, from here up into the leaf, right? That's the color maybe that when the leaf was young and full of hope, and now, you know, it's getting a little bit aged. Still splendid though, right? Okay, so makes sense. So now I can go around and play with these mixing of the various colors depending on what I have in front of me. But one thing that you want to notice is that mostly I go from light to dark. That's how watercolor works. From light to dark and build up the layers. So far, with the exception of this yellow here, but that is that's just so you could also do that, right? The yellow in here, I put this yellow over the red, and the yellow spread out, it's a question of the area that is drier and more wet. One gets into the other one depending where the water tends to go. So I put water in here, right? That is fresh, is a lot of water, very wet, and the background here is a little bit dry already. As I put the yellow there, that areas around tend to soak up the water, so the water spreads out like that, and the yellow now is barely visible. But if I put a light color over a dried dark color, you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it, because that's the nature of watercolor, right? Meaning, because the watercolor is transparent, you need to work in layering. If you need to, starting with light colors over dark colors gradually. But if you work wet on wet, as you can see, then the whole thing is different. I mean, there are many variables, and gradually we will go over them, right? So let's see if we can now darken maybe this area a little bit more, right? So now it's getting a little bit dry, right? A little bit drier, and I look at this leaf. It's pretty flat. It's fairly flat. See that? I mean, it's not the same color, etc. But now maybe what I want to do now is leave alone the leaf for a while, let it dry, because I think that in terms of I'm saying that, but I'm going to put a little bit more paint. You can't resist it. Let it dry a little bit, but so this mottling, typical of, I guess, the chlorophyll, that kind of the pigment of the leaves is kind of change. It is kind of granular and irregular. Is well achieved with watercolor. So I'll leave it alone now, because with the next level, next layer, maybe I want to be a little bit more precise. So I'm going to work with dry on dry, a wet on dry, right? There's also such a thing as dry brush. Dry brush is you take your brush and then you squeeze out, you keep it very, very little content of water, and then you kind of start creating very, very dry brush strokes that if you do a good job, you can create a patiently, you can create a wash with it. You can create a regular ground, but it's difficult. You know, it takes some time to practice. You have to have a regularity in the brush stroke. That it takes some time to practice, but this permits you to achieve great details, and also you can create very, very controlled gradations. This is a method that I was trained to do in college in Italy, in Bologna, for the School of Surgical and Medical Illustration, because we had to be very, very extremely precise in depict the various, you know, anatomical structure and the surgery and whatnot. So it's very, very good. I mean, you could use gouache, but the watercolor has a, I don't know, has a je ne sais quoi, you know, that is just beautiful. So anyway, you see how you can achieve a nice gradation here. So I could go back in there with that, but dry brush, we're gonna wait to do dry brush a little bit more, because I want to first make sure that we have a good understanding now of the traditional watercolor, how it works, and move on from there. So today, as you might have noticed, we are going to basically tackle a subject that is 2D. I mean, it's technical, is not 2D, but it's fairly flat. Next week, I will get something more three-dimensional. Maybe we get. Actually, I have an idea what to get, but fairly monochromatic. You know, not too many colors, because we need to be careful with getting too many color in the beginning, because it might get a little bit overwhelming. So now you see how here I can go back in here, and with a slightly darker color, this would be dry brush, and a slightly darker color, I can block in the thickness of the stem, giving it a little bit of volume. I could block in a little bit more details, right, here and there. But I think that for today we have enough things to practice on. So why don't you do this? You go get, let's say, 3 leaves of different colors, right? A yellow one, a red one, and we don't have blue leaves, right? So we're gonna get the green leaf, and it could be any yellow, could be warm and cool yellow, right? It could be this kind of yellow green, if you want, either for green, and then paint 3 leaves, one of each color, so that we can start practicing with these technical aspect that we have seen today. So we're gonna start practicing with a wash, laying down a wash, right? And then wet on dry, wet on wet, right? And so then the other thing was that you want to do is, as you mix the colors, think of the complementary mixing, right? So in this case, if I want to gray down the red, I will be using a green, right? I can also put a little bit of blue in it if I want to make it on the violet side. But if I want to maintain the reddish nature of the color, the gray in the opposite color will gray it down without immediately mixing a violet, right? Because if I use a small amount of blue, it is not really going to change the red, but the interaction is going to be different. Let's leave it like that. So if I want to gray down the color, I will use its complementary. So so try these. There's techniques, 3 leaves, and then I'm really looking forward to see your work. So take a nice walk in the park before all the other artists grab the leaves, and then get cracking. Okay, bye-bye.